Hi, everybody. Welcome officially. Good afternoon, good evening, maybe good morning, depending on where you're tuning in from. Thank you so much for joining us virtually today. My name is Kayla Alawi, and on behalf of Atmosphere Press, I am so pleased to welcome you to today's live author reading to hear the best in new writing. Back in May, Atmosphere Press held a special live reading contest. And during that contest, we invited non-Atmosphere Press authors from our community to share their best work. I am so excited to say that the response was truly incredible. And after careful review, we were able to select three standout voices whose writing really moved and impressed us. So today we're going to be hearing from Saul Hillel Benjamin, Barbara Black, and Bradley Wester. At the end of today's event, we are going to have time for audience questions. So during the readings, if you think of a question for one or more of our writers, you can just type those in the chat for us. I'll make sure that your questions get asked. We do also ask that you stay muted for the duration of the event, but feel free to use the chat for praise and comments, of course, in addition to your questions. One last note is that we at Atmosphere Press appreciate your support today and always. If you have a manuscript of your own, we would love to read it, so submit your work today to books@atmospherepress.com. Again, thank you so much for tuning in to support Saul, Barbara, and Bradley today. We're going to start off with our first reader, who is Bradley Wester. Bradley is a visual artist, writer, and cultural activist. He was born and raised in New Orleans and lives and works in Miami, New York, and Rhode Island. He completed a creative nonfiction memoir, Shiny Object: The Making of an Artist, represented by Talcott Notch Literary. Its title chapter, Shiny Object, has been nominated for both the Pushcart Prize and Best American Essays. Brothers Katrina, the first chapter, won the 2016 Fresher Writing Prize in the UK for Best Creative Nonfiction. He read a third chapter at the Museum of Modern Art in New York as part of the exhibition Club 57, Film, Performance, and Art in the East Village, 1978 to 1983. Wester is also an art and cultural critic and a contributing writer for filthydreams.org, as well as White Hot Magazine for contemporary art. He has an upcoming essay that will be published in the Los Angeles Review of Books. We'll now hear more from Bradley himself.
Hi, thank you, Hala, and hello to Barbara and Saul. I'm happy to be here. I wanted to say before I start that my creative nonfiction memoir is written in first person, like most memoirs, but not this chapter. When I was young, as a starving artist in the 80s, I was not very good with intimacy, and I kept commitment at arm's length. Until these two giant events, which I'm going to describe in this chapter. So I chose to write this chapter in third person to represent how intimacy still feels kind of foreign and uncomfortable to me. Oh, and by the way, I will attempt to sing a few lines in this chapter. My deepest apologies beforehand. Third person falling on a stoop in Brooklyn. For Bradley, the terrible beauty of that September day in 2001 had started like most other days, walking radio. Doug and Bradley's first dog while still living on 3rd Street in Park Slope, Brooklyn. Her non sequitur name, a sudden inspiration of Bradley's then art dealer. Bradley was late getting radio out that day. Prospect Park, Frederick Law Olmsted's masterpiece and most dog-friendly park in the city, allows dogs to be off-leash until 9 a.m. throughout its bucolic 90-acre long meadow, which extends 20 city blocks. On this glorious fall morning, he left the house at 8:50 a.m., just a short half block to the park. Bradley reached the field by 8:58, chatting with another dog owner along the way. He let radio off lead with an eye for park rangers on horseback that were known to give $100 tickets at the stroke of 9. Doug had just arrived at his Manhattan office. Radio sprinted, the other dog followed. Suddenly, at precisely 9:03, a loud, distant boom. The woman dog owner and Bradley looked up. They could see a sizable billow of dark smoke already on the horizon. My God, I hope that's not my studio building, Bradley snickered, though it's more likely to be the Con Edison electrical plant next door. Bradley's art studio was located in Dumbo, the down under Manhattan Bridge overpass section of Brooklyn, in the shadow of overhead ramps to both the Manhattan and Brooklyn bridges. It's a dramatic neighborhood on the East River's edge with old factories, spanning bridges, and spectacular views across the East River of lower to midtown Manhattan. Gotham City. You expect Batman to scream around a cobblestone corner in his Batmobile as Spider-Man swings down on a web between tall buildings. The area had been a mostly abandoned manufacturing zone that had filled up with artists. Its complete gentrification was about 10 years away. The smoke plume seemed to be in line with it. The two dog owners continued chatting, commenting on their dogs and the spectacular weather. Out of nowhere, a panting jogger with wires in his ears. "We're under attack. The trade towers, 2 planes have just flown into them." "What? Oh my God." The joggers ran on. The dog owners scrambled to leash their pups and run their separate ways home. Bradley did not step down into his garden apartment, but sprinted up the stoop and banged on Sam and Elise's front door. Sam flung the door open. He was already watching CNN upstairs in their bedroom. Elise had left for work, and the kids were at their private school nearby. They watched the live cast for a few minutes in disbelief. "Come on," Sam ordered. Bradley followed Sam up to the top floor, then fell in line behind him as they climbed metal rungs attached to the wall and opened the roof hatch. They were not special effects. It was really happening. A bird's eye view of smoking, burning towers in the distance. They stood frozen, perhaps a full minute. Sam couldn't reach Elise. Bradley tried Doug on his cell phone, but both his office and mobile numbers weren't connecting. Sam and Bradley began their climbing back and forth between the Real View and CNN updates. Bradley's phone rang. His brother Richard from Los Angeles. "What the fuck? I know. I'm on the roof with Sam. We're watching it right now." "You're watching it?" "Yes, we can see everything. We're high enough. It's about 3 miles away." "Where's Doug?" "Doug's at work. I can't get through to him." Richard had stopped along the freeway on his way to work after he heard the story break on his car radio. As Bradley narrated what he saw, Richard relayed what he heard about other developments on the radio. "Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh shit. Holy shit. Dear God. What's happening, Bradley? What's happening? It's coming down. It's coming down. Oh my God. It's coming down. What's coming down? The building, the tower, it's collapsing." No fucking way. No fucking way." Richard hears the collapse reported on the radio. With 2,500 miles between them, they're both shaking, trying to process what they are seeing and hearing, but can't. The collapse, in slow motion special effect, ends in giant clouds of smoke and dust obscuring the entire lower end of Manhattan. Sam runs downstairs to watch CNN. Richard finally speaks. "Jesus, Bradley. Jesus." Silence. Bradley watching, Richard listening. "You must be freaking out," Richard says. "Doug still works in the Empire State Building, right?" Suddenly, Bradley is falling, or the sensation of falling. And inside the falling, a dark miasma cuts off oxygen to his brain. Then the mental fog clears as he grasps what might happen next. An attack, tallest buildings, the Empire State Building, Doug. Bradley starts to fall apart on the rooftop. Again, it's Richard doing the thinking. If he could call Bradley, perhaps he could call Doug. Which quickly became the way thousands of loved ones communicated until batteries died. Both Elise and Doug were safe. Doug in a colleague's bunker-like basement apartment, waiting out the possibility of another event and their next move. Eventually, they and over 2 million others would make their way back home on foot. That evening, in the eerie, jaundiced-colored late-day sky, Sam and Elise, with their stay-at-home Park Slope neighbors, poured onto the stoops and sidewalks, comforting each other, hugging and crying, waiting for their loved ones who worked in Manhattan to return home. The first one was Mark, from 2 doors down. He worked on Wall Street, his office only blocks from the fallen towers. Bent and exhausted, he trudged past, carrying his briefcase. The entire bottom portion of his dark suit covered in a pale powder ash, pulverized office buildings and their contents, including, unthinkably, human beings. Tears and the darkest exhilaration when greeting each neighbor as they made it home. Elise and Doug worked in Midtown. It would take longer. Nightfall, streetlights, illuminating the giant lush ash and sycamore trees of 3rd Street and the ornate extra-wide home facades of brick and limestone on this historic block. A burning, acrid, electrical smell in the air that would become familiar for months. Finally, Elise. A half hour later, Doug. So weary. Doug brightened as he turned into the front garden and saw his Brooklyn family on the stoop. Bradley flew off his step into him. Bradley was capable then of something he had felt too afraid to do before and would not do again to this extent until standing on a porch in Vermont 9 years later. But here in Brooklyn, for just a little while, maybe for a bit longer, he would fully open his heart to Doug and let his love pour out. Just then, a surreal stillness, an ethereal fluttering, like a soft snowfall on a warm night in early September. Doug and Bradley broke their tight embrace to reach out their open palms to the sky. Tiny scraps of paper, fragments of invoices, receipts, certificates, filings, small bits of manuals, job forms, warrants, and circulars, affidavits, permits, and contracts, floating down onto the couple and the entire Brooklyn neighborhood, almost gloriously, like the loosed wing feathers from 2,606 angels ascending to heaven at once. On a Vermont porch, Bradley and Doug had lived beneath Sam and Elise in their beautiful garden apartment for 13 years. Doug pried Bradley from his toxic artist loft by agreeing to live in Brooklyn if he found an apartment with outdoor space. They couldn't believe their luck. On arguably the most beautiful block in all of Brooklyn, the perfect garden apartment on 3rd Street, a half block from Prospect Park. Sam and Elise were excellent landlords, not only because they refused to raise the rent for 13 years. Their daughter, Rachel, was 4, and Eli was a baby in diapers when the lease was signed. The kids have no memory before Doug and Bradley, who became their surrogate uncles. The two families shared dinners at least once a week, some holidays and excursions. They were family. When Doug and Bradley decided to elope, they asked Sam and Elise to be their witnesses. Bradley was adamant against marriage. He only agreed to marry because his health insurance ended with his recent teaching job, and it was a way to immediately get on Doug's plan. Why should I buy into the whole hetero construct of marriage and take the blame of making a mockery out of the institution when you straight people with your divorce rate and find a husband game shows do a pretty good job of that yourselves, Bradley would say to anyone listening. It wasn't legal then for same-sex couples to marry in New York. Sam and Elise arranged for their friend Annie, a Universalist minister, to marry them in Vermont. They dressed up. Bradley wore one of his signature hats, stylish as ever. Both he and Doug wore their blue shoes. On this beautiful June day, Annie married them on her porch, overlooking her garden in full bloom. Just the 4 of them and Annie's daughter. Sam wrote a beautiful poem in the couple's honor. Elise read an Ogden Nash poem she doctored to suit a gay couple. Then Doug pressed play on the song that had always expressed his feelings for Bradley, Crystal by Stevie Nicks. Do you always trust your first initial feeling? Special knowledge holds true, bears believing. I turned around and the water was closing all around like a glove, like the love that had finally found me. And I knew in the crystalline knowledge of you. Bradley's turn would be next. He nervously rustled through a collection of poems he had brought by his favorite poets, Stevens, Ashbery, Doty, and a rant by O'Hara about a fight between 2 lovers after one walks out. Beautiful poems that spoke to love's complexities rather than to its cliches, and therefore to Bradley's ambivalence. He looked at Doug standing beside him, so happy and proud on his wedding day, as the heart-wrenching Stevie Nicks song continued in the background. Bradley became acutely aware that he not only loved Doug, but was in love with him profoundly. This man had known him for nearly 17 years, witnessed his every flaw, and still wanted to spend the rest of his life with him unconditionally. If this was family, it was like none he'd ever known. As these observations and feelings welled up in Bradley, they terrified him. He had built levees against this kind of vulnerability his entire life. Stevie Nicks. How the faces of love change, turn in the pages, and I have changed. Oh, but you remain ageless. I turned around, and the water was closing all around like a glove, like the love that had finally found me. Who knew that 10 years later, the song would offer Bradley a profound reinterpretation, as expressed by Hurricane Katrina's ruin of his family home and near destruction of his below sea level hometown of New Orleans? The music ended. Bradley tried reading the first lines of his poem unaffected, one last desperate attempt at sandbagging his eroding defenses. Then he simply let the floodgates go. Even as the sobbing shook and undid him, Bradley instinctively tried to wrap himself up, to dissolve, to disappear, until Doug reached out and held him. They hugged and kissed, and everyone else wiped their tears. Finally, Doug took the poems from him and read them aloud, while Bradley softly cried for the rest of the ceremony. A watershed moment for Bradley, not only for the copious tears he shed that day, but because marrying Doug had changed everything. And the water was closing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bradley. I mean, such a range of emotions that we crossed there just in that brief reading. I think that was such a beautiful tribute. So, reading next today now is Barbara Black. Barbara has published two multi-award winning collections of short fiction, Music from a Strange Planet in 2021 and Little Fortified Stories in 2024. Winner of the 24th Annual Writers Union of Canada Short Prose Competition, Barbara has also been longlisted twice for the Commonwealth Short Story Prize, was the 2022 Adult Fiction winner in the International Wishing Shelf Book Awards, and recently Grand Prize winner in the International 2025 Islands Book Awards. Her work has appeared in many national and international publications and anthologies, including the Cincinnati Review, Geist, the Hong Kong Review, and the Plaza Prize's International Literary Competition Anthology 1. As a flash fiction writer, Barbara was shortlisted for the 2023 Edinburgh Flash Fiction Award and won first prize in the International Plaza Prize's microfiction contest, as well as second prize in flash fiction. Barbara lives in Victoria, where she gardens and rides the twisties on her trusty Triumph motorcycle. Barbara, take it away.
Hi, thank you, Hina. I'm going to read from my book, Little Fortified Stories, because I have to hold it up there. It's a collection of 96 flash fictions. And if you don't know what flash fiction is, it's about 300 words to 1,500 words. So it's super compact. There's a lot of compression, and it's a genre I just love working in. My book and its title, Little Fortified Stories, started in Lisbon. I went to a writer's workshop there to study flash fiction, and I decided since I'm in Lisbon, I should just try some ports. So I went to the port center and ordered a flight, and I picked up the first one and smelled it and tasted it, and I immediately had a very strong line come into my head. This is how it works for me with writing. It's usually a character voice comes to me, and she was a former opera singer, and I immediately wrote the story down and enjoyed that exercise so much that I did more of those in Lisbon. And when I returned back home, I added other spirits and ended up with a section of my book called Distillations. And there's a lot of other sections as well, but I'm going to read from that first section, Distillations. And this story is from the bourbon section of the Distillations. It's about a philosopher I'm sure you all probably know. The fuel that stokes my musings. When Jean-Paul Sartre pruned his ash tree into terrified stumps, an arborist came to the door, indignant. You're butchering that tree. A hack job like this will be the death of it. All things benefit from an occasional knockdown, JP retorted, and went back to puffing on his pipe. There are knockdowns, but then there are knockdowns. His phone rang. A voice like a shovel scraping a sidewalk demanded, "You need to stop smoking that pipe. You're screwing up my schedule." It was the Grim Reaper. "What? You don't even do house calls anymore?" The Reaper laughed and said he was too booked up to get to all his clients, half of whom were never home anymore. "Hardly anyone does door-to-door these days," he said. "I had you scheduled for a year from now, and here you are sucking tobacco fumes like it's already doomsday." "That's precious coming from you," said JP, adding, "I'd invite you over, but it'd be the death of me." "I've heard that line billions of times, but good delivery." "Wait," Sartre said. "What do you mean, a year from now? Isn't that kind of early? Get rid of my pipe, the one object that makes my existence worthwhile? Even my dog comes second. My pipe is the fuel that stokes my musings. Its plumes frame the hours of my day. I can put numbers on those days." They spoke for another hour on the phone. JP reclined on the couch with Onsoi, his dog, curled up in his lap as the two callers discussed immortality, Grim Reaper against, euthanasia, Grim Reaper against, and free will, Grim Reaper against. "My grim friend, I find it pretty ironic that you, of all people, have an opinion on free will, given that you rob people of it every day." No one had ever called the Reaper friend before. There was a pause. "Listen," said the Reaper, lowering his voice. "Can I call you every so often to chat? We could make a trade, the dog for another 10 years. That is the story of Sartre, and I'm going to move to a second section called The Unseen. And this is a section that has kind of lyrical and mysterious stories in it. And this particular story was inspired by music. I was listening to a singer, Amina Alawi, and she was singing in Persian and Arab Andalusian, languages I don't know, which is good because I don't really want to know what the words are. I just want to be influenced by the melody. And once I finished the story, I looked at it and I realized I had written a story about my recent writer's block, but I didn't know that when I was writing the story. So here it is. What may console those with the loss of their lexicon? A woman stands against a brick wall and sings my songs all day. How does she know me? She with her crooked brown teeth and voice like a rusty pair of scissors. She has a sack at her feet, which, they say, contains a piece of fabric from the glove of St. Barbara's right hand, a pocket watch stopped at 10:45, and a tiny vial of frankincense. Every day, a boy passes by and asks for the same song, which she sings, while he dances in his ragged clothes like a crazed marionette on fire. The air in that square smells of melted beeswax, as soothing as an old memory with none of its details. The wagoner passes by with his squeaking cart full of mouse fur slippers, which make me want to cry. The woman sings my words. The merchants stop their hawking to listen. And yet, I have no words anymore. They've abandoned me. One day I ask the singer how she knows my songs. "I don't really," she answers. "When you pass by, your songs follow behind, and I hear them. They're lonely. They float into my mouth and down to my belly where they ask, to be sung. And now we're going to move to another section called Ancestral Fabrications. It's kind of a sassy and crazy section in some ways. It's about my heritage. And the stories are true, mostly true, and not really that true, but stories I wish I had in my ancestry. This one is true. You might not think so when you hear it, but it is. It came from my paternal grandmother, and it's about her grandmother who was really mad at her husband. He was drinking. She booted him out of the house and made him live in a shack in the backyard, and he had to pay half the milk bill. So here it is. Granny LaRock, 1892, Russell, Ontario. Us girls ran the other way when we saw Granny LaRock stomping out the back, screen door whacking the house like a punishment, her eyes two pie slits, apron strings flailing at her hips like the arms of drowners. And did she yell? No. Did she swear? Well, yes. She said, God damn him, God almighty son of a. And the ground shrunk away from her feet. Chickens squawked crazy, and Gramps' favorite chicken, Miss Pinkham, blasted into the coop, hunkered in the corner, quiet as goose down. Granny LaRock, she was small and had hands that could count your ribs, even with your sweater on, and fingers like talons, not long but wicked skilled. She plucked Miss Pinkham right out, wrung her neck like a dishcloth, chopped the head clean off, and nailed it with the milk bill to the door of Grandpa Frank's shack. Ripped off her apron, flung it on his front step, went back inside with her hair all in curlers, made her look like some old town Medusa. Grandpa Frank snuck out the back of the shack, bottle sloshing inside his jacket, and us LaRock girls jumped into bed, tucked ourselves in tight as two matches in a matchbox, red heads sticking out like lit up tinder. And I'm going to finish with a very short prose poem. It is from the very last section in my book called Fado. And these are all prose poems that I wrote while listening to fado music, which is a Portuguese kind of music. Some people call it, Portuguese blues, and I don't believe that's a good description. It's all about nostalgia, grief, loss, love, and it's very emotional music, sung by a man or a woman, usually in a very small cafe or restaurant. And there's always a 12-string Portuguese guitar playing. So this fado was inspired also by music, and I will read it now. Fado 10. Love is a long, slow cigarette we feed on till the ashes drop. Your lips on mine, my lips on yours. We inhale each other as if the other were of ice. I would kiss even your embers if that's all that was left. If it meant that in the end you would never be extinguished. That wraps up my little sample of the little fortified stories, and thanks for listening. Thank you, Hila and Bradley, for your reading. And thanks also for Atmosphere Press for creating the event.
Yeah, thank you so much, Barbara. That was a beautiful reading. I have to admit, I laughed out loud at some of the lines and some of the other language. Yeah, it's just so beautiful and evocative. So thank you so much for bringing that today.
Thank you.
Of course. Our final reader for today is Saul Benjamin. Saul is late to fatherhood, earlier to public service, recent to poetry. He spent 5 years in the first Clinton administration, 9 years of attempted conflict resolution in Lebanon, Bosnia, Morocco, and the Bible Belt, and 14 years creating multicultural and interdisciplinary leadership programs for schools and universities in the USA, Germany, and Morocco. He has been published in The American Scholar, the Yale Review, BBC Three, the Christian Science Monitor, Dissent, the American Oxonian, the Poetry Society of Great Britain, FM 107 Winnipeg, 2019 San Diego Poetry Anthology, and chosen by a US Poet Laureate and a UK Poet Laureate for the 2016 and 2017 Vice Chancellor's International Poetry Anthologies. Saul was the co-winner of the 2019 Delphi Chapbook Prize and a commissioned prize winner for the 2023 New Voices Project. From 2019 through 2024, he was the lead juror for Canada's Prime Minister Excellence in Education Awards, an elementary school lunch monitor for the Winnipeg School Division. He also spent 9 weeks organizing new voters in the Blue Dot in Nebraska in 2024. I'm excited now to welcome Saul.
Thank you, Haley. You just spoke a name of one of my closest life friends who I believe is joining us. I'm properly humbled to be the third in this trio. Something that Bradley mentioned, I'll actually be sharing as one of the 5 or 6 pieces from my book, Where Late the Sweet Bird Sang. But I'm here in Winnipeg, so good afternoon to you all. Folks here, the locals here, call Manitoba mountainous unless you're thinking of Kansas. More accurately, I think Manitoba makes North Dakota seem mountainous. I'm thinking of mountains right now because both of my colleagues here, Barbara and Bradley, have shown us what the peak of writing skill can be about. Long ago, I'm reminded Robert Frost, still a splendid poet, if a complicated and in some ways unsavory human being and parent, he offered a notion that poetry is really singing. And whenever he would introduce his work, he would use the phrase, I'm going to show you a song. I'm not going to read you a text. And with that too wordy introduction, let me offer 5, perhaps 6 short pieces. The first is At Summer's End. Months of waiting, then everyone clamoring down the hill to the orchard for its meats. Winter long, rooted, snug in bed with books up to our armpits, we plotted summer's populations, the musty peach, the sex of pears, the sorbs and apples, amulets for our mouths to dream. Differences are what count. I can tell by the actual thump whether it's an apple or a sorb that's hit the path or the soft or hard ground. Apples recite, delicious, sweet. Sorbs are blunt. Some of us need ladders, but others have only to reach for what they need. Lowest branches deliver up their goods with least objection, but even topmost fruit falls down to mumble from our wooden crates. Delicious bitter, delicious red. Then, falling light, the mind at war, in search of what we might become, we strip the summer down to seed and lug our thievings up the hill. We steal what we already own. This next piece is called The Falls at Gallatin Creek, and it's a set of tercets cascading, if you were to look at it. But let me try to voice it, show it to you. The Falls at Gallatin Creek. If we think of how things might have gone, we've already missed the point. Here, nothing is over. Even if the differences continually tempt more satisfying explanations. After all, that's the reason we've come here again and again, expecting the perennial display might demonstrate our capacity to overcome the permanence of change. Instead, we're left to marvel at the demanding symmetry, shadows migrating with sunfall, the arc that measures the shape of rock that crafts the cataract, words adrift, headlong down the looming chute of vapors, rising to see trophies scorned by gravity, and then somehow lift straight up, incited past our earnest fingertips to argue memory's hold on exactly what it cannot keep, weighty things like friendship or marriage, those fragile architectures of circumstance and hope whose every claim we both doubt and desire, taken so easily too lightly, we always risk assumptions. This is how things are, or this is how they'll remain. But here at Gallatin Creek, in the first approaches to springtime, we chart necessities where we stand. An uncertain ledge reaches beyond itself to dispute last year's certainty. Shale giving way to quartz or metamorph. Persistence nudged here, now there. We dare to keep what we doubt to trust. Our footing fails, so we shift weight and stumble past our broken faith. Sunlight sings and breaks the freighted edge of guarded truths that hold us back. We fall and rise into our lives, and falling reach. This next is called the marriage stanzas, groups of 10, groups of 6. The marriage stanzas. Nothing not dared, everything tempted, wearing pomegranate and crimson, romping in hues of teasing vermilion. One night we parried tongues, hands, teeth, but you only get so much time, and clocks are not built for perpetual rewinding. Those days, language itself was the dance. We quoted, exhausted, the 3 famous words, as if telling somebody they're loved was defense against Kerosine's chance. I once knew a voluptuous mouth poet whose haberdashery of sunflower blue and yellow cravats issued lengthy laments. Last year's certainties mornings retake, dizzied verse stranding in aphrodisiac, ambitious to figure everything out. Once, later, I toddled up a hill and came down with a threat of 1,000-word manuscript, each syllable savvy, each couplet well hung. Art, everybody knows, is tough work, but I'm tired of dancing, I really am. Would anyone mind if I just sat still and pictured the sweet industry of bees, plodding from root to stamen to flower? My trousers are not rolled, I'm not old, I just like trousers pleated quadruply. Take from settled history, then, quarrels we must. We need not be pawns in some ancient tryst. Let's make the bed and sit in a garden, ours or borrowed, surrounded by the dull hum of bees. What was that dance we enjoyed between perfection and its fierce verdict? I think it was the rhythm of a question, asked, not answered, a turn of willing ear toward the prospect of insight shared. It's hard not fleeing tomorrow's comfort when you're stricken by yesterday's loss. Knowing remembers before memory believes, but nothing remembered is ever over. To music we've never heard, let's dance, yet found names we can only guess, desiring everything, lucky with less. Bradley's account of 9/11. This poem is called When Autumn Comes to Broadway and Maiden Lane. It's inscribed September 12th. Everywhere the signs are rising, chores of definition are what we are about. Experts rush and counsel, relentless about the obvious, and possibly it helps. But rainfall and star showers, these are what we seek. Different braveries to lift the brick and molten glass, the burnt confetti of bone and steel that stings the air our hearts inhale. For us, other autumns will rise, days of clarity, possibly graced. For now, we must risk ourselves to find ourselves. Standing without you at the barricade of Broadway and blooded Maiden Lane, I'm lost without a map. Except that you are also stumbling or perhaps searching for a version of a compass to steer us by. Is it apricot or bergamot whose taste in my mouth lingers from yours? Or perhaps just memory's ache, more fierce than facts, more tenacious than hope, that tests an uncertain season with foolish certainties. What I know is little, but it is this. Somewhere west of urban chatter, Cathedral rocks fill with flowering quince, and scarlet brush parades temptations more brave than you or I would risk. Near, though out of present reach, a cardinal trills its tune, beckoned as if to claim what neither facts nor hope have rights upon, but yet might teach. And I'll just end with a sonnet. Laud. Love, word quiet, speak softly and earn your place in heraldries of touch and taste. Love can be still and still be love. Love, word eager, sing plainly but without haste, the best of measure's hopeful trait. Love can be still and still be love. Love, heart ready, asks simply of a world that's poised with simple proof of absent voice, pivots of breath, a pause, a will, so near heart's hub they hardly stir. Love can be still and be love still. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Saul. I think that was just a beautiful way to end and to close out all these other snippets that you shared, such beautiful language and really expert writing. Thank you so much. So at this time, we have time for our audience Q&A. So if anyone in the audience has a question for one or more of our featured writers, just go ahead and type those in the chat and I'll make sure they get asked. We do already have a couple questions coming in. The first question is for all three writers, and it is, what part of the writing process do you find the most joyful, and what is the hardest? I'm thinking we could go in reading order. So Bradley, do you want to start us off with this? Oh, Bradley, it looks like you are still muted.
Am I muted still?
You're all good now.
Okay. I was going to say mostly it feels like hell writing for me, uh, but I mean, just like my art practice, there's something so wonderful when I let go, and it just starts to take over. So being in that groove is something that I look forward to, but it, of course, takes showing up.
Yeah, I think that was an apt way to put it. Yeah, thank you for that description to start us off. Barbara, what about you? What do you find the most joyful and, on the other hand, the hardest? Oh, sorry, Barbara, I think you're muted as well. The common Zoom trap.
Yes, you were correct. Um, I really I love the first phase when I'm getting I'm a random writer. I don't plan things. I'm more of an intuitive writer, and so when I get these people around my head who are talking to me, and I find that very exciting and expanding the story as the characters kind of lead me into the story. I love that part. I actually used to be an editor, so I actually really like the editing part as well. The part I don't like is promotion. I'm kind of an introvert, as probably are many writers, and I just find that after, as you know, as an author, after doing that, all that, work, and then you have to go and promote yourself. I just fold when it gets to that point. But I love all the other processes right through to, finishing the book.
Well, that is definitely good to hear. I'm glad that there is enjoyment coming through as part of the process. Saul, what about you? What do you find to be the most joyful and the hardest about writing?
In some way, of course, they're the same. I wait for music, and then I struggle to hope that the notes will show me what songs they want me to sing. The most frustrating thing is waiting for an editor to tell me that my demographics, though hardly au courant, might yet allow me to learn more in the company of other good writers and listeners and see where the next book project takes me. And the next book project is about being late to fatherhood. I have a more than adorable, more than premature teenage young boy. And he has threatened me, as teenagers I'm told do, with the claim that I must live a long, long time, Papa, as he puts it. I asked him what he meant, and he said, I have a number. Yes, I waited. 103, he said. I gently pushed back and said, That's pretty ambitious, honey. And he said nothing, but with, I think, the precursor of a stand-up comedian, grinned and literally verbatim spoke these syllables. It's a prime number, Papa, and you'll still be in your prime.
Ah.
Yeah, what's
It's
not to read
like,
that?
yeah, it's like you're passing this artisticness of writing through osmosis in your household. That
Well,
is
we all know
beautiful.
what parents do to children. Yes, let's hope not.
Right, right. All right. This next question is again for all three writers, and I'm really interested to hear this from your perspective. How do you know when a piece is truly finished? Barbara, do you want to start us off this time?
That's a good question. I usually put things away. I'm saying, things because I've written mostly stories, not a novel. So I get to a point where I can't tell, is it ready? Is it finished? And I put it away, and I don't look at it for a while. I read other books, or I get my spouse editor to look at them. And that's that's basically the way it goes.
Yeah, sometimes you just need an external voice to say, yeah, I think
Or
I
or
think it's
just take
ready.
a break. Just take a break.
Right.
You
Oh,
know,
that's huge. Yeah, I think more writers could stand to do that during the process. Saul, what about you? How do you know when a piece of yours is truly finished?
Two things occur to me to say. First, I'm fortunate in the dearest friends I have. And sometimes they just say, enough, Safi, stop. You'll ruin it if you go further. Other times, I just don't know, but I hear the music and I think, okay, that song is there. Maybe it will lead to another. But I'm done even if it's not finished.
Yeah, I think that's another really fantastic sentiment, which, at least for me personally, has been very difficult to accept at times. So I think that's an important one to remember. And Bradley, what about you? How do you know when a piece of yours is truly finished?
I'm newer to writing than I am to making art. I guess really seriously been writing for maybe like 13, 14 years. Um, it's odd because the end of my manuscript came to me before the manuscript was done. So that was a weird thing that happened. Like I saw the end and then I had to catch up to it. So that happened. It's different with the different kinds of writing I do. I think when I have a deadline for a critical piece of writing, that helps. And also, I have one very close friend who looks at my writing before I send it out. And I've been lucky the few times I've had editors to help me shape a piece. But yeah, I mean, it's like it's instinctive. My artwork is that same. It's a question we've always asked each other as artists, but also when I was teaching, we talk a lot about that with students. Like, how do you know a piece is done? And it's a mystery, it's a mystery, but sometimes it's just done.
Yeah, sometimes it just lets you know, right?
Yeah.
And the hard part again is just listening to that sometimes. Bradley, while we're with you, we've got a question for you specifically. Your theme of accessing emotions is familiar to me. Did you say that after these two events, you were able to connect more freely?
Could you repeat that exactly?
Yeah, your theme of accessing emotions is familiar to me.
Uh,
Did you say, or would you say that after these two events, you were able to connect more freely?
uh, one of the problems I have with reading aloud is I get emotional. So it's something that I'm working against. So I wish I had a little more distance on my personal writing because I do. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just saying it out loud, again, like coming late to writing, this kind of writing, the memoir writing. So I prefer to have a little more distance on it.
Yeah, it kind of sometimes it's necessary in order to connect more deeply in a productive way, let's
Yeah,
say. Sometimes you need that distance, I
yeah,
found.
yeah, yeah.
We've got another question again for now. This one is back to for all three authors. What advice would you give to fellow writers who are trying to get their work seen and heard? Saul, do you want to start us off this time?
Hmm.
Not especially. I'm not sure I'm in a position to offer advice. When I had students, both at university and other settings, other learning communities, my response to their question was always to ask another question. And one might just be a simple thing. Um, don't be too influenced by all the people you're impressed by. Take it in, earn the mileage, but find your voice, which sounds like a cliche, but it's not a little closed truth. I think it's an opening truth. Um, Ultimately, you have to trust yourself. And as I too often think, late to fatherhood, I don't know where people figure out how it is to learn about having a child, let alone having a book or a poem or a piece of art or a piece of music. Persist, I think, is what I'd end up saying. Persist.
Yeah, I think that's definitely astute. It touches on this thing that I've noticed with a lot of writers. It's kind of this weird, like, feeling like you're learning the thing as you're going, and then people are asking you for the advice, and you're kind of like, well, I'm just figuring it out as it happens sometimes. So I think that really speaks to that feeling. Bradley, what about you? Is there any particular advice you might give to fellow writers trying to get their work out there?
Don't do it. Don't do it. Um, no, I um, persist for sure. I mean, I've gotten so many rejections in my life as an artist, as a visual artist, as a writer. It's just insane. Like I think it takes some tough skin, a little masochism, but really one should only do it if they have to do it, if it's really necessary. I often tell friends that what the hell was I thinking? It was hard enough being a visual artist. Now I'm starting this. I mean, the learning curve of like the whole literary world is insane, and it's almost as more crazy than the visual art world. So if you want to go there, go there. For me, it's just something that was necessary.
Yeah, it's definitely something that can be surprising and challenging in many different strides. So I can totally see where you're coming from with that. Barbara, what about you? Any kind of advice that you would give to other writers?
I agree with Saul. I think or maybe I'm not sure what you said about find your voice, but I think that that is an important thing. That yes, read as well. A lot of people think they want to write, but they don't really read, and they need to step it up quite a lot. Um, I also think that you can start small. You can start by submitting things to small poetry or whatever to journals and see what the response is. A lot of them will offer feedback either for free or for another extra fee, and that can be really, really valuable. Lots of people love writers groups. Um, I have still not found one for short fiction. I have a poetry group, but that can be really helpful. The group I belong to is there are all seasoned poets, and they are excellent at critiquing without hurting, critiquing very well, and we learn so much in those groups. And of course, then you start to have connections. People know what contests that are coming up or where to submit, etc. And it just makes you feel a little bit less alone as a writer.
Yeah, the benefit of a writing group cannot be understated. Wait, cannot be overstated. Um, definitely such a useful resource and community to tap into there. One other question. This is for all three writers. Again, I think this is the last question we have time for, but I'm excited to hear from you. Is there a writer or even two who inspired you to write? Bradley, you want to start us off again?
A writer that inspired me to write? Um, Believe it or not, Karl Ove Knausgaard. It was, I don't know what it was about that writing. I didn't get through the mountain of his books. It was so banal, so boring, so everything, it made me feel like, oh, I can write. I have more interesting stories. But I also have this love for ephemera and the everyday. And from that, looking in the overlooked corners, sometimes there's, I don't know, inspiration. It's kind of the way my visual work works. But yeah, I often think I don't really understand it, but that guy, after reading him, I decided to write a book.
Yeah, sometimes, inspiration can come from unexpected places. Saul, what about you? Or is there a writer, perhaps even two or more, that inspires you to write?
There are so many books behind you, Hella, on your bookshelves, and I guess mine are somewhat overflowing too. I've been fortunate in being in the company of people who I admire, but I'll just encourage anyone listening to this to find the works of the following three marvelous people. Anything that you can find from Robert Penn Warren is still worthy, especially his long poem Audubon. Anything from Amy Clampett, who came very late to poetry. I think she was in her early 60s before she published a series of 5 stunning books. And not a poet, though in a certain way, yes. Anything that David Quammen, the great writer about science, writes is worth being anchored by. There are a few others, but that should do.
Yeah, I mean, somewhere to start, right? And I mean, like you said, we all have so many inspirations, it can be hard to pick from them. But I will ask you also, Barbara, to do just that. Is there a writer or two that especially inspires you to write?
I, when I was thinking I wanted to write short stories, I didn't have a clue about anything. I just knew I wanted to try. And I started with Chekhov. And what I love about Chekhov is that his writing is so clear and concise, but there's still these embedded deep emotions in them. And also, he never belabors an ending. Sometimes they're even like, oh, that's the end. And you have a little bit of a hang up, but it's still a full story. So I really love Chekhov, and also kind of a completely different kind of writer. The short stories, you may not even know this, that Gabriel Garcia Marquez writes short stories. I never really got into his novels, but he has, there's a lot of magical realism in them, and they're beautifully written. And they always have a very lovely emotional core to them. Even if they're surreal, they still have a human feelings in them, not just outrageous, ideas. So those are two that I'm really fond of. There's others too. Bruno Schultz, I love his weirdness. Samantha Schweblin, if you know her, and many others who write in a very use language in a very distinct way, which I love.
Could I comment to the other writers? And it addresses this question. I think another answer I might have about inspiration is reading poems. I was blown away by the two of your poems. I mean, just absolutely gorgeous. But I read a poem almost every day or a part of a poem, and I think that it certainly has had an influence on my writing. I bow down to poets, the purest art form.
Completely agree.
I really struggle with poetry. It doesn't actually come that naturally to me. It seems when I write poetry, it sounds prose-like, and when I write prose, it sounds poetic. So kind of blends in.
Mm.
But I agree that the condensed
Mm.
style of a poem can be really
Amazing.
amazing.
Awe-inspiring for sure, at least on my end.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for all these thoughts, sharing all these thoughts with us, to the three of you. I also just want to say thank you so much for sharing this writing with us today. There's really something just so special about hearing writing come to life in the voice of its creator. So to Saul, Barbara, Bradley, for being with us today, for sharing your words, being generous with your time. Really, thank you so much. And of course, to everybody in the audience, also, thank you also for joining us to help celebrate these writers. It really means a lot to see a community come together like this. I also want to encourage everyone to check out atmospherepress.com, where you can browse our new and forthcoming releases, sign up for our email newsletter, or, of course, submit a book manuscript of your own. You can submit your work to books@atmospherepress.com and just let us know that you attended today's event. We'll look forward to hearing from you, but until then, that is it for tonight. So I hope that everybody has a great rest of your week.